You're so bad, Lamau. So, we're in silver. Blood and bronze. Plat, 100%. So confusing. Bro, I get you. If that's plat, I SSL. That's like bronze or silver. No, it is plat. Or is it? Right, I'm Skully, and if people ask me what my rank is, I will tell them plat. Now, I don't care about my rank. It's one of the benefits of not being good is there's like no weight of expectation. I usually only play ranked to get my placement matches. And then those usually place me somewhere in the vicinity of platinum. But it would be good if I could know for sure what my actual rank is. So I decided to dedicate a whole month to playing ranked Rocket League. Now, playing ranked is a miserable affair. People really care about their rank. Even at the like lowly ranks of platinum, there are people with inflated egos and really short tempers. And so I decided to do this experiment as part of the miserable month of March, where I play ones, twos, and threes. Because I'm such a wizard of with word, because I talk real good, I decided to do this on Tuesday, Wednesday, and threes day. The plan was to play at least 100 games of each type, so that I have a nice big sample size, and do this across 4 weeks so that there's like a range of days. And then I recorded every single match with like a whole bunch of different statistics. I really unnecessarily geeked out over this. And I chose to do this in March purely for the alliteration. But as it happened, the new season of Rocket League was starting at the beginning of March. So that worked out quite nicely because it meant that we had a nice clean slate to build the rank on top of. And I want to make sure there are no outside influences. So I will only be playing ranked ones, ranked twos, ranked threes, not playing any other game type, including casual or tournaments. I don't know if they do have any influence on your rank, but just to be sure, I'm not playing anything else. And then, of course, I will be solo queuing because this is to find out what my rank is. And so that means that even if I was lucky enough to find a decent teammate who I gel really well with, we're a great team together, unfortunately, at the end of that match, I'll have to say goodbye. Going into this, I obviously had my own idea of like what I expected the outcome to be. So firstly, I expected it to be miserable for the aforementioned reasons. And then secondly, I expected to be platinum. Now, there is a range of plats, and I do consider myself to be at the kind of higher end of platinum rank. I feel like platinum rank is where players start to realize that twos and threes is actually a team game. And so while I can't hit the ball, I do feel like I have a good sense of where I should be on the field, how to kind of be a good teammate, essentially. Um, and so because of that, my prediction was that I would be basically plat 3. Indeed, if we look over the previous seasons, you can see that I usually end up in platinum. Sometimes, for example, my ones will go down to gold, but I think that's quite normal. A lot of people who don't main ones tend to have a lower ones rank. But as well as that, my twos sometimes goes up to diamond, which I kind of chalk down to the fact that I often play games with viewers of my stream, and sometimes they want to play ranked. Apparently, not scared that I will tank their rank, and I think that does kind of inflate the rank over what it would be if I just purely solo queued it. So, let's start with a summary of how the weeks went. Week 1, no data. I didn't play because my granddad died. So, miserable month of March, getting off to a great start. So we tried again, moved on to the next week. So we started off with twos, and I very optimistically but very wrongly assumed that I could just do 2-hour streams, which meant that we only ended up with 13 games. And I realized quite quickly that across the 4 weeks, that wasn't going to get us to the 100 game mark. So for the next stream, which was ones, I tried 3 hour stream, and still not enough. And so for threes, we went with a 4 hour stream, and then turned out that was enough. And so we had to do 4 hours going forward. But even with the kind of smaller number of games, there are trends which are sort of to be expected. Like, for example, the number of goals I expect to be higher in ones. Same for saves, which then obviously affects the fact that we would get a higher score in ones. I'm also trying not to forfeit my games so that I can play, a representative game for as long as possible, which means that in ones we had significantly fewer forfeits because it would mean the other side has to forfeit. And unless I'm like clearly beating them, they're not likely to forfeit. Hence why we only had like 2 out of 20. Moving on to the next week, we were doing the 4 hour streams, and that got our numbers a bit more on track. My average score went up a wee bit for twos and threes, but down for ones. And the win-loss ratio is like close to half, but it is a bit lower for ones and twos, but higher for threes. And I also added overtime stats because I thought it would be interesting to see how close some of the games are. And then from that, we can see that for ones and twos, it's about every 5 games we have an overtime, whereas for threes, it's closer to 3. Going to the next week, again, we're on track to hitting the 100 games that we need. And also the win-loss ratio, again, is getting closer and closer to like half. It's interesting to see that even like throughout each of the weeks, the ratio of saves is quite similar between twos and threes, but the goals is different. We're scoring a lot more in twos than we would do in threes. One other metric we have here is goal difference. I thought it would be interesting to know how many goals we tend to win by and how many goals we tend to lose by. But it actually ended up being basically 2 for everything, except we tend to only win by like 1.5 for threes. Like that, we have significantly lower goals for threes compared to the other modes. As the games go on, the forfeits for ones is like steadily climbing. And interestingly, the kind of MVP ratios have been pretty consistent throughout the weeks, where I'm the MVP of my team roughly every 2 games in ones and twos, but for threes it's closer to like 5 games. Which takes us to the final week, where we did indeed hit our 100 game threshold. Now, I may or may not have very purposefully stopped as soon as I managed to hit 100 games in ones. So throughout the weeks, as you can see, a lot of the statistics were actually pretty consistent and didn't really change too much. The average score fluctuated, but sort of settled towards these numbers. And then the win-loss ratio actually ended up on the kind of positive side of 50%, which was surprising to me to see because it certainly didn't feel like I was winning half of my games, or more than half of my games. There's also a real noticeable difference in overtimes where there seems to be a lot more in threes. So threes really is like not as high scoring as the others. And I guess part of that is the fact that, we have overtimes a lot more. Okay, let's get to the proper numbers. As I said earlier, I tracked the statistics for every match that I played. So we've got the date and time, the day of the week, which I was tracking because I thought it would be interesting to see if there was a difference depending on which day I played on. But I ultimately ended up just playing on the same day, like the punny day. So this is kind of a moot point. And then we have whether we won the game, whether there was an overtime, whether the game was forfeited, the goals that my team scored, the goals that we conceded, and then a goal difference. We then have my statistics, so how many goals I scored, how many assists I got, how many saves I got, how many shots I got. And then on top of that, I'm also tracking the points that I got for each match, as well as whether or not I was the MVP. So these are to try and get an idea for how much I contributed to the team. So even if we lost the game, if I was like the top of the team, then that would mark it as an MVP. Then we have the importance statistics. So what was the rank for that match? So both the rank and the division. And then I don't have backers mod, so I don't actually know the MMR. And so I just came up with my own value, just calculated from the rank and the division, which would make it easier to track the rank as I progress. I also tracked like my mood, because one thing I've noticed, from playing Rocket League is that there are times where I can be playing and I'm just wondering who the fuck is playing this game right now, because I'm peaking. I'm hitting the shots that I intend to hit. I'm saving beastly goals. I'm like just on top. It's crazy. And then, as you might be able to spot here, there are the opposite times as well where I'm just like, God, I can't hit anything today. Like somehow even worse than the bar I'm usually hanging on to. And so I thought it would be interesting to know how my mood might have an impact on the game. But ultimately, there wasn't enough variation, and even at 100 games for each type, I don't think there was a big enough sample size to really be able to get anything meaningful out of this metric. And then finally, we have the goal ratio, which is how many of the goals scored for my team were from me, which obviously in ones isn't too exciting. There is technically the ability for the other person to accidentally own goal from kickoff without me touching the ball at the beginning of the match. I think that would then count as me not scoring, and so it would technically be possible to have less than one, or basically not one. I guess it could also be more than one, but yeah, essentially that didn't happen. So just ones all round for ones. And then finally, we've got the shot goal ratio, which is essentially how many of my shots resulted in an actual goal. Where one is basically every shot resulted in a goal. You can see there's actually more than one for some of them, which is essentially when someone scores on your behalf, which is always greatly appreciated. The point of doing so many games is to try and smooth out any of the anomalies. There could be, and there were, matches where people, teammates basically decide, I'm not going to play anymore, and that game is just chalked. No point in it. So that obviously has a big effect on a single match. And so the more matches we get, the more we can reduce those sort of anomalies. But we can do like a zoomed out view, which is quite helpful for being able to get like an overview of how the matches went. You can see that I've got it sort of color coded. And if we flick between the different games, you can sort of get a sense of how they compare, as well as like looking down and seeing the changes as the games went on. For example, in ones, we can see that those forfeits kind of increasing, where at the beginning hardly any, and then towards the end there's a lot more. So even though the final statistics give us a number of how many games we can go without a forfeit, it doesn't quite give the full picture. So I think that's why I kind of want to include this, of just being able to see how it sort of changed over time. But flicking between them, if we take a look at, for example, the shots per goal ratio on the right there, you can see it's quite green across this on ones, but as we move to twos and then to ones, you can see there's a slight difference, which is essentially there's a higher contrast for threes, which is basically meaning that either we missed all our shots or we made our shots count. So it's a lot more all or nothing, where the numbers for ones is a bit smoother. I'm much more defensive in threes because I've got two other teammates who can go forward and attack. I'm a lot more confident with my ability to defend balls than to shoot them. And so having the two teammates up front, they can deal with that while I can just deal with the net. And on top of that, I definitely find in a lot of games of threes that teammates seem to really neglect the net. It's so frustrating watching the net just be left wide open. So I often am forced to go back anyway just to make sure that we don't have that open net. And that can obviously then mean that I just don't take quite as many shots. One thing that was really challenging about this kind of experiment that I hadn't thought about until I actually started it was to not play good. So this whole thing is not me trying to see how high of a rank can I get, like play as good as I can, try and get as high of a rank as I can. That's not the point of this. The point is when I'm just playing Rocket League as I would play it, what rank would that be? And so I shouldn't be like try hard in all my matches or anything like that. I should just be trying to play it, trying to enjoy it as much as I can, ignoring the fact that it is slightly different than playing just casual because again it's ranked. But I kept having this thing, like I kept feeling the pressure of doing well, knowing that I had to record the game, and so I had to keep reminding myself not to that's not the point. The point is not to win all the games. The point is just to play it as normally as possible. And I hadn't anticipated just how difficult it is to sort of suppress those feelings. And then another thing that crossed my mind as I was playing it was luck. There was definitely a bunch of games where I had lucky goals, lucky saves, and at the time I was thinking to myself, does this sort of nullify this match? Like there are definitely games, there are 100% games that I played where I beat someone who was definitely better than me. So what does that mean? Like should I not count that game? And if a game was won through luck, then it's not really marking my skill, is it? It's just kind of the luck of the game. So I wasn't really sure how to feel about that. Like, is that actually part of Rocket League? And then I remembered the wise words of Shogun. This is Rocket League! You see, luck is part of the game. To be honest, as we said, so in threes, I stayed in diamond the whole time. So if that's each one of those games was lucky, then is it really luck? I don't know. But I did decide that when I'm just playing Rocket League, luck's gonna happen. So it is part of the game. So I did kind of go ahead with it. So about what my rank actually is. I thought it would make sense to plot it on a bar graph. And what I had in my head was there would be a normal distribution where I'll kind of go up and down ranks, but at the end of 100 games, we'll be able to see some sort of curve like this where we can see, even though it's sort of fuzzy, what my rank is. We can get a good idea of roughly what the rank should be. But in hindsight, I hadn't really anticipated just how little variance there would be. So there is technically a curve. It's just very, very sharp. So I thought, well, okay, we'll instead just look at the line graphs. So these are plotting those like fake MMR values that I mentioned earlier, where we have at the top here my threes rank, just below that my twos, and then quite a bit below that my ones. And we can see the twos and threes are pretty kind of uniform. Like there's not too much variance there, but there's quite a bit of variance for my ones rank. I do have it's a bit hard to see, but there is a trend line that kind of shows the trend based on this, and we can see that for twos and threes, it's pretty much flat. I mean, it is slightly increasing, especially for twos, but it's increasing a fair amount for ones. I don't think that this means that I'm just going to continually keep increasing my ones until I get to SSL. I think in an ideal world, I would have an order of magnitude more games, and then that would eventually bring once we're able to get that line flatter, then we can be a bit more sure what the value is. But I do think we get a good idea from this graph of where the ranks are sort of sitting at. I thought it would be interesting to compare that line graph against the one from the Rocket League kind of tracker. So we see got the games from this season, the over 100 games that we played, and then looking at the line graph, it's pretty obvious where the miserable month of March sits. Now, I mean, sure, you can see it's actually labeled March 24, but it's very like digital. Like you can very clearly see the first week it went down to here. It was the same for a full week, and then it dropped. Same for a full week, went up. Same for a full week, went up. Like it's so there's not a lot of like continuity here, whereas this is quite continuous. Like it's really smooth. And it also changes at times where I'm pretty sure I didn't play any ranked games. So like I'm not sure what influences these changes, which is why I didn't want to play any other games outside of the ranked games themselves. And that's possibly what's making this so jagged. And it's the same for threes. You can see again quite clearly these sort of sharp changes. Twos is less apparent. It's less like that. I don't quite know why. This does look a little more continuous. So I don't know exactly what is influencing all of these, but I just thought I'd share that. So, thinking of what the outcome of all this is, how do you actually define someone's Rocket League rank? Because obviously we've got 3 different modes with 3 different ranks. What's the objective Rocket League rank? Like if someone asked me, what's your rank in Rocket League? What is it they want to know? Like, presumably they just want to know how good are you at the game. But does that then mean your ones rank? Because as you can kind of see from the other data, like I'm technically doing a lot less in my threes match than my ones match. In your ones, you're getting ranked on your ability to shoot, to score, to save, to be able to play the game, to be able to control your car, control the ball. That's on you. So is your ones rank your true Rocket League rank? But there's no teammates, famously, in ones. So when you're getting ranked on ones, you're not getting ranked on your ability to play as a team. It's not testing out any of your team skills. I think just fundamentally, the reason why people have different ranks for those different modes is that they are different, not necessarily just that they're getting carried by better teammates. I think it is generally different between threes and ones. And I play threes, I don't play ones. So if someone's asking me what my rank is, surely my rank should be the game mode that I play. If people are commenting on my gameplay, asking what rank that is, that's in my threes, so that should be my threes rank, right? And then we get to the rank itself. As we saw, for threes, my rank was consistently diamond. So does that mean that's my rank, diamond rank? Because I would actually say no. Even though I was diamond throughout all of it, I still think I'm plat 3. Which might sound like I'm trying to just twist the result so that it matches my prediction, but genuinely I think I'm plat 3. Because even though I was consistently in the diamond rank, the majority of my games I felt like my teammates and my opponents were all higher skilled than me. Because there are definitely other times where I'll play a match, and it's very clear to me everyone involved in this match is at the same level as me, and those tend to be really nice matches. But for almost all those diamond matches, it felt like I was trying my best in those matches, but the people I was playing against and my teammates usually just seemed to be a higher skill for me. Not like they weren't Smurfs. I just think they were genuinely just better than I was, i.e., the next rank up from where I am. Speaking of Smurfs, by the way, when I was in ones, it was weird to go drop down from plat to gold and then hit harder games. Where I was playing games against people who were definitely not gold. Like they were many ranks higher. Even for ones, they were definitely Smurfs. But they were beating me. And so what I expected was that they would just win their games until they inevitably ranked back up to platinum and then throw that game to get back down to gold. And sure enough, when I managed to escape back into platinum, I went up against someone who was like crazy good. They were beating me 5-2, gets to the last second, they forfeit the game. I presume it's what I was saying before, that they want to stay in gold. So they weren't throwing the games while in gold, but I imagine when they inevitably rank up, they throw that game, and we just happen to have not come across anyone throwing the game yet. No. Oh, hell no. Hell no. Okay. That's a they were very, very cordial, very polite, very fun, but they just threw that game. That's so fucked. Because for people who are genuinely trying to rank up, they'll be stuck in gold against people smurfing on them. Like the Smurfs are basically gatekeeping plat so that they can't break through. And I just think that's fucked up. Anyway, my rank. I think my conclusion is that there is no objective rank. The game modes require different skills, and so what makes sense to me is to use the rank for the game mode that I play, which is threes. But on top of that, as I said, I don't think the rank that I actually have is necessarily my rank. I just think that I'm able to play with diamonds, but not necessarily that I am a diamond. So I'm going to keep claiming Platinum Valor. And if anyone's talking shit, I'll just send them this video of me yapping for half an hour. I'm curious what your thoughts are on Rocket League ranks. Let me know in the comments down below. Like, for example, do you think that ones actually is your true rank? In which case, how would you account for the ability to play as part of a team? I'm actually not done with the ranked. Now that I've done this, I've got a control, like a set of data that I can compare against. I try to keep this as representative as possible for me just playing the game mode as normal, but there's obviously lots of little things that could be tweaked to see what the effect would be on my rank. For example, I played this whole thing with an Xbox 360 controller, which likes to drift off to the left and also occasionally disconnect. Okay, not a good time. Hello? Would it have been better for me to play with, for example, a PlayStation 5 controller? Probably. But again, I wanted to try and keep it as representative of just me playing it as is now. Other things that you could change are like camera or control settings. And that's where it's going to take me next, because I've been putting out YouTube shorts of like past clips. Go check out my YouTube shorts. And so I've got Rocket League gameplay from like over a year ago, which still has screen shake on. And I keep getting comments from people saying that I should turn it off and it will improve my rank. And I don't believe them. And look at that. We've got a control now. So we can find out, does screen shake affect my performance? Because I don't think it, probably for people who can actually play the game, who can actually hit the ball, maybe it will affect your gameplay. I don't think it's going to affect my gameplay. So I'm going to be doing the miserable month of May to find this out. So I'm going to be playing for rank for another month, so that will be miserable. But I'll be having screen shake on, so it'll be miserable for the viewers as well. So look out for that in the future. And remember, I am Plat.